Hey, Global Village, what's up? And by the way, Happy New Year, and I hope it is a prosperous and positive one for anyone who may be listening to this video. And I mean that quite sincerely, no matter whether you agree with what I'm saying or not. So, pretty much like almost every video I decide to record, it's rather impromptu and in the moment and just spurred on by uh, something that has just really agitated me or inspired me to the point where I feel like I just need to talk about this stuff. And like always, it's virtually non-scripted. I've done nothing more than sort of spend a few moments thinking about what the topic will be, and yeah, I just feel inspired to talk about it. So in this particular video, I just want to talk about racism. Now, I grew up in probably the most conservative of cities in New Zealand, which is Christchurch. And I'm old, and so when I grew up, the city is no doubt not quite what it was. It's probably changed a lot. But what I can say is that my circumstances were in some ways, quite unusual. So I am half Chinese, but I never really knew my natural father. And I grew up for a number of years in a sort of solo mother situation. And I had a half brother who was blonde hair, blue eyed, and he was about just over a year younger than me. And we were incredibly close. And I think a part of that powerful bond when we were young was simply by virtue of our circumstance. Kind of all we had was each other, and we were in quite an unstable situation. Certainly in our very young years, we kind of moved around a lot into sort of various state housing, and I seem to recall at one point we were living in a sort of like a community compound, and I remember as a very young boy going out and playing in the various sort of old decrepit sort of play yard facilities they had available there, and there being like a shared kitchen type facility. It's amazing what you can remember even from a time when you were very, very young, although these memories are very just fragmented moments in time. But yeah, so when you are very young, the idea of race and being from a certain, genetic bloodline and all these kind of things, they don't mean anything to you. All I knew was that I had a brother and a mother, and I was, they were my world, and my brother and I did everything together. And in fact, we were so close that, for example, if one of us got hurt, we would both cry. It was very unusual. Like, I could see my brother in distress, and you would just spontaneously break out in tears as well, and vice versa. It was very, very unusual thing, but also very powerful. And a part of him will be with me forever, despite of everything that came to pass in the ensuing years that caused a great deal of suffering and pain, and for us to split powerfully. But he will always be a part of me. Anyway, all this is to say that, we aren't born being racists. It seems to be something that evolves and happens as part of our engagement with society and our development and understanding of the world. And, maybe it would be unfair to say racism is purely a social construction, because there's probably strong evolutionary traits that make tribalism a very powerful and useful tool, especially in the more early era of human development, when the survival of tribes and small groups of people probably depended very much on what we might now sort of regard as sort of a racist like sentiment and attitude. But it seems to be something that ultimately doesn't serve any higher purpose in terms of if we want to think about where we want to go as a human species. There's nothing about being racist that I would call being a part of an enlightened perception about what it means to be a human. It's generally regarded, as an undesirable attribute for, I think, pretty obvious reasons. Now, that said, I still don't quite understand why in this day and age it has such an undeniably powerful hold over so many people. And I would like to think that from when I was a young boy to where I am now, here in New Zealand, racism has become less of a problem and we've become more of a multicultural nation. Now, I think generally that is true, but nonetheless, and I was just reminded of that today, that there are still people who are deeply imbued with racist sentiment. And unfortunately, it's never, or very rarely, exhibits itself as a form of pure, naked racism. It's always framed and disguised in a specific narrative where there's almost like a form of plausible deniability that it's not really racism, but it's just this idea that, they want to protect New Zealand and New Zealand should be for New Zealanders. I mean, I tend to always open up my videos with the term global village, and that's for a very specific reason. Because first and foremost, we are all human beings and we are all bound and united by that singular reality and aspect. And I think this idea that we classify ourselves as being from this country or having this type of, and that this country belongs to people with this particular genetic blood or, people that grew up ethnically in this place. To me, it represents almost a kind of sickness of the mind. So I push back against it because I love all people. And I don't differentiate or value one type of person more than another type of person because of what country they came from. And I don't say that New Zealand belongs more to people who somehow ethnically see that the country belongs more to them than it does to other people. Even if those people grew up and were born in that country, and that, like me, New Zealand is the only country I've ever known. It's who I am. It's my identity. Everything about how I grew up is a reflection of New Zealand society. And, in as much as I was someone who kind of looked a bit different from a typical Kiwi and had to live with the consequences of that growing up. And naturally that did frame and colour my own perception of what it meant to grow up in a country like this compared to someone who, say, was more sort of European in their appearance, for example, that they would have had a different lived experience. So I guess ultimately what I'm trying to say here is trying to just represent who I am and why I feel the way I do, and how, based on just a very recent interaction I had, how it breaks my heart to realise that racism is still alive and well in New Zealand. I don't know if it has improved. I believe it has. I don't believe it's as bad as when I was young, but it's still very much here. And the real question is how much of it is just part of the human condition. Therefore, will it always be a part of us, no matter what, as our species evolves? Or will we ultimately shed that particular aspect of us? It's certainly something I hope that one day will be the case, but If so, it's probably not going to be something that will be truly realized for thousands of years. And that is if humanity has a long-term future, which is, obviously a very large question mark. I ultimately I am the sworn enemy of racism, but I don't know that being openly combative and just straight up just hating on people who have racist tendencies is the right way to try and cure the sickness of it. I think one thing that's very clear to me that people who do harbour racist sentiment, they are generally angry, right? They demonstrate a sense of conflict and rage, and that they feel like they have been wronged in some sense, and that they're fighting against an invisible enemy. Now, when I look to other countries and I see that there's a strong movement at the moment towards the right, and that there's a strong sense of deepening nationalism in many countries, and that people are angry about immigrants and blaming immigrants for a lot of their country's problems, and how this ultimately becomes a sort of a reason to be or behave in ways that we might think is racist, where they say, oh, I'm not racist, but we can't have these Somalians or whatever coming into our country because they're just causing riots, they're causing it to be unsafe in our streets, they're stealing our jobs, whatever the justification and the reasons are that they talk about these things. It's just not that simple. A country does need a sensible and safe immigration policy. If you just allow everyone to come into your country, then you're going to have problems with it. And this isn't about racism. This is about controlling the basic economic and social health of the country so that you can have sensible policies that are sustainable financially and socially as you allow and integrate other people into the country. So I get that. It's not about open borders, but it's not. But how much of it is about having a racist ideology and then leveraging these kind of policies because you have these racist ideologies? And that's the problem. That's where you have to kind of figure out whether the horse comes before the cart or whether it's going the other way around. And for many, I suspect it's the other, but it may also be circular. So one may breed the other and they may have a symbiotic relationship, so that it doesn't even make sense to try and say which one comes first. And that perhaps the real issue here is one of proper education about the fact that just people looking different to you or having even just different cultural viewpoints and perspectives does not immediately make them your enemy, and does not immediately make them worth less than you, or for that matter worth more than you either. And that the people are going to have different views and opinions and ideas about the world, and that's in some sense, we've got to learn to agree to disagree on certain things while still respecting the fact that we are ultimately all human beings and united by that unalienable fact. So I admit this is a massively rambling video I'm making here, but I'm making it because it is, in some sense, at the heart of so many of the issues, both the small issues that we might have day to day, and also the very big global issues where people are just drawing these tribal lines and making this identification about what lines these people stand on, And often it's through reasons where those people have no choice about it because they were born into that circumstance. One doesn't choose to be born a certain ethnicity. I didn't choose to be born who I am. I didn't choose my genetic makeup. It's just what happened. And those were the cards I were dealt, which is exactly the same for all of us. So in that particular sense alone, it's just ridiculous to then hold these attributes against people, or to hold these attributes as somehow inherently making you better or more worthy because you hold these particular traits, when you never had anything to do with the fact that you hold these attributes. They're just a part of the cosmic dice rolling. So we've got to get past that sort of bullshit and start thinking about the things that we can control, which are who we are and the way we conduct ourselves as human beings. And, you know, for me, I am trying my very best to be the best person I can be, to try and grow and be a better person tomorrow than the person I was yesterday. And I think that's what we should all be trying to do. I am so far from perfect, and I have so many flaws and things that I know I can do better and that I should be better about who I am. But I know my heart is in the right place, and I know that I genuinely want all people to be happier, to feel safer, to feel more hope about their future. And I don't see how we can do that while we continue to create these battle lines where we continue to identify certain groups of people as being the problem, in inverted commas. If these are the attitudes that we continue to believe are the parameters upon which we need to frame the way the world should be structured in the future, then I think humanity isn't going to evolve in a positive direction at all, but is just going to continue the slow burn of destruction that I think we are and have been on since the modern era. And, you know, the Industrial Revolution and human population exploded and all of that kind of stuff happened. Because humanity is in a very destructive arc. I have no... Personally, I just think the evidence is overwhelming in that regard. It's evident in anthropomorphic climate change. It's evident in the fact that we simply cannot stop fighting between each other, that we think securing our own economic and financial well-being is about controlling and pushing down other people and stopping other groups from doing well in other countries. It's like a kind of a them or us attitude rather than an idea of the concept of a win-win, how humanity as a whole can lift all of us up. And I don't know, maybe some people think the way I'm talking right now is just pie in the sky and that that's just not possible, and that in order for one group to do well, another group has to do not well. But if that really is the price, if that really is how our species has to go, then we are no better than animals. We really aren't. And yeah, I don't want to be that person, and I will never be that person from the moment I draw my last breath. I will continue to try and believe and aspire to the idea that we ultimately can be something better than we are now. Anyway, that's it. That's all I wanted to do. Completely rambling video. It was inspired by a very negative interaction with another Kiwi, which kind of made me feel incredibly sad. But I want to rise above that. I don't want to be a person who's controlled by hate or fear. I want to believe that we have a positive future despite so much evidence to the contrary. Anyway, Bendy out.